over to police at 2 o'clock this afternoon. It has been confirmed by his lawyer. You recall, of course, following a request by the Zimbabwe Republic Police for him to hand himself over. They accuse him at this stage of inciting violence. You know, of course, emanating from the protest that we saw in Harare yesterday. Many questions were also asked. You'd recall that at the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance's head offices, Tendai Biti just a few days ago was addressing some of the members and supporters, and it basically declared that the MDC alliance had won this election. So yesterday, the Zimbabwe police are saying that Tendai Biti has a case to answer with the police. They want to have some discussion with him, also perhaps to try and identify some of those who were involved in yesterday's violence. Some of the T-shirts that we saw yesterday at that particular protest were people carrying MDC Alliance T-shirts, as well as some of the other regalia as well. Joining us exclusively live here on SABC News, I'm joined by Ngobizitha Mlilo, who is Mr. Tendai Biti's lawyer. Mr. Mlilo, thank you very much for your time here on SABC News. First of all, can you confirm for us that Mr. Biti will be handing himself over to police at 2 o'clock?
We heard through a press conference that the police are desirous of speaking to Mr. Tendai Biti. It's rather unusual that the police would communicate that they are desirous of speaking to an individual through the press. Mr. Biti is not a flight risk. Mr. Biti's place of residence is known. Mr. Biti's place where he practices law is known. So we find it rather strange that you'd communicate through the media that you want to speak to Mr. Biti. But to ensure that things move forward, we are confident that Mr. Biti has not contravened any laws of this country. We will present Mr. Biti at 2 o'clock at the police headquarters, listen to the police, hear what they have to say, and we'll take things from there.
Some perhaps would argue that all of what was seen over the past 24 hours in the streets of Harare could also be as a result of the address that Mr. Tendai Biti had given outside the headquarters of the MDC Alliance, where basically he had declared that the MDC Alliance is a winner in this election, and some would say that could have been incitement.
Well, that kind of argument suggests that Zimbabweans don't carry agency of their own. That they are not people who are able to think for themselves, calculate for themselves, see what is happening in the country and decide for themselves. That argument suggests that Zimbabweans are basically stupid. They can only be told what to do by certain individuals. The suffering that Zimbabweans have faced is personal and it's common. There's a commonality of mind among Zimbabweans that things have to change. And Zimbabweans have continued to express confidence that the will of the Zimbabwean people should be expressed through an election. Elections have been stolen since 2000, 2002, 2005, 2008, 2013, and they've always remained peaceful. But at some point, Zimbabweans need to take a stand to say we are going to defend our vote, we are going to ensure that our will is done. The MDC has always been a peaceful party since 2000, determined to remain on the course of achieving a democratic Zimbabwe through peaceful and democratic means. But history has shown us that those who make peaceful transitions difficult make violent ones inevitable. So it is incumbent upon SADC and the African Union that they take a stand on Zimbabwe and ensure that we avert the stealing of the will of the Zimbabwean people to ensure that Zimbabwe remains a democratic and a peaceful country.
But was that not in contravention of the electoral laws? Because you essentially had Mr. Tendai Biti declaring that the MDC Alliance has won these elections even before an announcement had been made by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which is the right body to announce the elections in this country.
Well, the elections in this country, the results have been posted outside polling stations. The MDC fielded election agents at every other polling station during this election. And this reflects the maturity of the MDC. Over the years, we have learned where the rigging was happening, that the rigging was happening at the polling stations. The various amendments that have been done to the electoral laws, chief and most important amongst those being that the results must be posted at the polling station. And secondly, the MDC has been able, for the first time, to deploy agents Therefore, it means that at every polling station, agents must sign what is generally referred here as a V11 form.
But Mr. Mlilo, was that not insightful? Because generally you had an environment where you had the MDC Alliance campaigning, and for example, ZANU-PF territory, ZANU-PF campaigning in MDC Alliance territory. Was it not insightful for Mr. Biti to have stood on that podium, surrounded by thousands of your party of his party faithful, and basically declare the MDC Alliance as winners, yet that had not yet been announced by the official? Was that not insightful for him to do that?
Chriselda, that's precisely the fallacy of the argument, that if we create an environment in which Zimbabweans are campaigning for themselves, that should be celebrated. It should be something that is normal in any democratic country. And it's also a reflection that the past elections have been violent. If there is a significant notice that the elections in 2008 have been markedly different from the previous elections, it reflects the character and nature of the state that we are fighting. And therefore, it's basically praising a fish for swimming, that the environment is free and fair, and it should be normal in any democratic country. And if a person announces...
But taking into account the political environment, Mr. Mlilo, we know the history of the election process in Zimbabwe. It has been violent. So there had been hope perhaps that this time around there would not be the kind of violence that we saw that has now resulted in the death of 3 people. Was it not insightful? Did he not take into account the political environment, that what he said could have led to people being on the streets and seeing now bloodshed?
We are not children of a lesser God. We are not children of a lesser God. We are entitled to democratic rights as everyone else. If someone says what Mr. Biti said in South Africa, that will not be news. So why should we be subjected to rules and regulations that basically suggest that we are children and we cannot think for ourselves? The idea of creating a democratic Zimbabwe is a Zimbabwe in which we are able to freely express ourselves, fulfill the promises of the national liberation struggle, which chief amongst them and many more would be that Zimbabweans must be able to express themselves. What I was trying to explain to you is that what the MDC simply did was to collate the results at every polling station and add the numbers. And it's clear that what the result would be. If that is consequent to that, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Was there any permission for that gathering? Because one of the other arguments is that there was no permission for that gathering to take place, which subsequently led to some kind of incitement, which then saw the thousands of MDC Alliance members, party faithful supporters, outside the election centre yesterday.
But why do you take away the agency of individuals themselves? Included in those crowds would have been people who are not ZANU-PF members, who probably, MDC members, would probably be ordinary individuals who want the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to declare the results. The agency of the ordinary Zimbabwean must be respected. It must not simply be taken as if Zimbabweans can't think for themselves and they have to wait for Tendai to tell them what to do.
So there was no permission for that gathering?
What is the relevance of that question? The issue is
But permission is required for you to gather, is it not?
Well, the point is, if Zimbabweans are able to gather, and which they've done over the years in a peaceful way, and be able to express themselves, Zimbabweans have lived under a repressive state for the past 38 years. They are reaching a point where they want to see a democratic Zimbabwe. You are holding on to the election results. You are announcing results of Harare first, and we have areas as far places as Gwanda where the results have already been announced. So if Zimbabweans are gathering to say, release our results, I can't see why Zimbabweans would be blamed. And the idea of blaming the victim of the violence is akin to saying a woman is raped, you want to blame her for going to see the boyfriend. We are the victims of the violence. What is the justification of shooting an unarmed woman carrying a handbag and shooting her at the back? There is no amount of justification, legal or otherwise, to justify this violence.
So there was no documentation giving a go-ahead for that gathering. Can we just get that out of the way?
It's a non-issue. It's a non-issue.
Is that a yes or a no, Mr. Mlilo?
It's a non-issue because this is a political issue. Don't legalize a political struggle of people that have been under repressive state for a long time. The idea of legalizing the debates around the Zimbabwean people is problematic. This is a political issue which must be resolved politically. It is the responsibility of SADC, it's the responsibility of the AU to see to it that the Zimbabwean problem is solved the African way. We accept that Zimbabwean's problem is an African problem that requires an African solution, but we should not confuse legalism and politics.
Mr. Mlilo, where is Mr. Tendai Biti now?
He's somewhere around.
All right, but I guess we will see him as he presents himself over to police, but official confirmation, of course. Just finally, when you have those discussions with the police, they're saying that they want him to perhaps try and assist them in the identification of some of the individuals also that participated in yesterday's protest.
Yeah, well, that's the problem of communicating that you want to see an individual through a press conference. We don't know what they want from him. So we have to go to the police and listen to what it is that they want to say, and then we take things from there.
So Mr. Tendai Biti has done nothing wrong?
We don't know why they want them. We don't know why they want Tendai. They said he must come to present himself to the police. We'll do exactly as they've done, and then we'll take things from there.
Go ahead.
No, we can't say he has done anything wrong when we don't know what it is that they want from him. Maybe they want to shake his hand or look and see how handsome he looks.
All right. Mr. Ngobizita Mlilo, sir, thank you very much for your time indeed for responding to our call. Mr. Ngobizita Mlilo is, of course, the lawyer for Tendai Biti. We do know that the MDC Alliance, Tendai Biti, will hand himself over to the police headquarters here following that call. The police here in Zimbabwe saying they want to have a chat with him. I guess this would also be regarding the gathering that he had with some of the party faithful, where he had declared that the MDC Alliance had basically won the election. We'll bring all of that to you live here from the streets of Harare. Just a quick update. It's relatively peaceful here in the Harare city centre this morning, but there is still police deployment, as we heard from the Zimbabwe Republic Police a bit earlier on this morning. We will also bring you a press conference live now from the Commonwealth Observer Mission. We'll hear what they have to say. Catch it all on SABC Channel 404.
Thank you so much, Chriselda. Do you get the sense that Tendai Biti is becoming an unintended leading character in the Zim election narrative? Okay, we wanted to continue with that conversation, but we'll continue later on as we continue to cross to Chriselda. But we're inviting you to call in on the show.